I want to tell you who we are. You know, we're your neighbors here at Watershed Management Group. We have, for presenters on the call tonight, I'm going to do a quick introduction so you get a chance to hear from each of these lovely humans in just a minute, but I'm just going to talk about them right now. I am Melanie Cooley. I am an education specialist, sustainable desert living educator here at Watershed Management Group. So my job really is to help people understand information and put it into practice. And so that is what we're working on tonight. We also have Lisa Shippick, who is our executive director and one of our co-founders, and does a ton of work in particular with our River Run network, which I'm going to hit on briefly as we go through. And we have Catlo Shippick, who is also one of our co-founders and senior program director. Catlo is our policy guy, our river restoration guy, and just all around a generally super knowledgeable human. So you're going to hear from Catlo breaking down some technical information as we move through today. So as we start in here, I'm going to keep introducing you to us in context for just a few minutes here. One thing that is very important to us is to contextualize the work we do, the place we live, in history and culture and in geography, in water. And part of that is acknowledging that this land and water where we live and work and love and express our, passions for life and our environment is the ancestral lands of the Hohokam and Sabapari people and is the current home of the Apache, Pasquayaki, and Tohono O'odham, who are the traditional stewards of this land and water, and really have shown the way to so many of us for how to live in a sustainable relation to this land. And more specifically, this water. And something that is particularly relevant at this moment of that piece of information is that, to our knowledge, the local tribes have not really been consulted on Project Blue. There is no public information to say that an Indigenous perspective has been included at all in the course of this proposal, which is unfortunate. I may understate occasionally. And then we're going to take a look at what our actual space is. So I'm going to introduce you to our space because our space is part of who we are here at Watershed Management Group. So hi, neighbors. We are a nonprofit organization serving Tucson and beyond since 2003. We work in Southern Arizona and Northern Sonora. We are not the city. We are not the developer. We are going to convey to you tonight our professional opinions based on over 20 years of water experience and on analyzing the publicly available information. We believe the relationship between communities and the environment creates prosperity for all. And that is a fundamental piece of the philosophy with which we are coming to this, that jobs and prosperity are not something that has to come at the expense of our environment. It actually is an integral part of our environment. And as I'm introducing you to our Living Lab and Learning Center, I have a question for you. So this is where you get to, put guesses in the chat. So our facility is 1/2 acre. We're on Dodge, just north of Speedway. The Discount Tire is our neighbor. And we've got a little adobe building, a building that used to be a garage. We've got a little duplex that's been converted into offices, and then the room I'm sitting in now. So my question for you is, guess how many gallons of city water we used in 2024. And you can pop that in the chat. Oh, you know this is a ringer question, don't you? Look at you. This is like, we clearly stacked the chat. Okay, fine, yes. We used 0 gallons of city water in 2024 for our 16 staff, our 12 interns and apprentices, our 20 docents, our 4,000 visitors, our 5 chickens, our 1 desert tortoise, Despacito, and our native desert landscaping and food forest. So we used literally no city water. So when we talk about living within our water means, living within our desert's capacity, that's something we practice doing every day here at our Living Lab. And we have data for that going back to 2016. So from 2016 to 2023, we were on rainwater 74% of the time and city water 26% of the time. So it is a question of rainfall and uncertainty. You know, how much rain do we have to work with in a given time period? But even with that level of not being certain how much rain we'll have in a given time period, we've been consistently 74% on rainwater since 2016. Last year was kind of a banner year. And our living lab includes rainwater harvesting, gray water, composting toilets, low water use irrigation, and fixtures. You're welcome to come on down and visit us. We're open during the week. We do some tours on weekends. We invite you all to come do that and visit us. And we're a private nonprofit. We are funded primarily by donations and then grants. We do some grant work also, and that's really where we come from. And so with that context in mind of who we are, I'm going to start, before we get into the kind of gritty stuff of talking about the data center in really specific ways, we want to take a moment to really ground us in a vision of what is possible. So Project Blue is providing a certain vision for Tucson. And that vision is one with a water extractive industry. And one thing we know from communities across the country and across the world is when one data center comes in, more come in. And so this is a moment where we have a choice to make about what kind of future we want for our city. And it's important to fight against what we don't want, but it is equally important to know what we are fighting for. And to that end, we ask your indulgence for a few minutes to give a vision of what we are fighting for, have been for 20 years here at WMG, and hopefully you like our vision, and if you haven't already joined us, you want to join us in the fight. So I'm going to pass it over to Lisa Shipek, our executive director, to take you through the next several slides of what we want from the mayor and council and our vision.
Thank you, Melanie. So excited to have you all here tonight. As Melanie said, our team's been working hard to pull this presentation together, all this information together for you. And Melanie mentioned our Living Lab and Learning Center, where we invite the public to come in and learn all of this. And we have postcards. So if you're really excited to send a postcard that centers our rivers and to mayor and council, please stop by our Living Lab. We're open 9:30 to 5, Monday through Friday. You can stop by, grab some postcards for yourself, potentially for a group of people. We want to get those out and share our message. So this is the main message tonight, which is we really want to ensure that we're protecting our water future, and that means not a drop of water for data centers. So what do we want from our mayor and council? We want them to say no on Project Blue. They have a study session on August 6th and potentially a vote on August 19th, and they have the opportunity to reject Project Blue at those two meetings. So that's what we're asking. We're also asking that the city creates an allocation policy that prevents all future data centers and other water-intensive industries from coming to Tucson. This is extremely important because this is not going to be the first time or the last time that this happens. The data centers are going to keep coming back. So we need a policy to protect our water future, and one that really prioritizes our local waters for our urban forests, for river restoration, for recharging our local aquifer to cool Tucson and to provide long-term water security. About a decade ago, Watershed Management Group shared our 50-year vision of what we see as possible to restore our heritage of flowing creeks and rivers in the Sonoran Desert. Melanie's going to share a little bit more about what the rivers were like historically, but we think we can bring that back. And there's been a really amazing decade of strong work since then. Countless community members and partners and coalitions have been working towards this vision. and such incredible momentum has been gained. It's so important at this point in time to keep that momentum and not head in another direction. And so what this looks like is becoming a hydro-local and river-centric community, as the communities since time immemorial, indigenous communities since time immemorial have been river-centric. That is why people are here. And I want to talk a little bit more about hydro-local. That is my next. Oh, no, I have another vision slide. Hold on. So this is an illustration of our vision at a specific location. We have a whole series of illustrations of what it looks like to restore our heritage flows. This illustration is of the confluence of the Tanque Verde Creek on the left, Pantano Creek on the right, and those turn into the Rito River. That's Craycroft Road crossing there. And this historically would have been an expansive wetland or ciénaga. There would have been beavers there historically. There would have been a massive riparian forest. And we want to see some of that brought back, and we think it's possible. We want to see those shallow aquifers restored. We want to see those seasonal flows restored, permanent water and wetlands, potentially beavers coming back. And all of that will support a much larger riparian forest. We've lost a lot of the cottonwoods that used to be there, but we can bring that back. How we do that. One of the key core concepts that we're talking about is hydro-local. And this is a term that we coined about a decade ago because there wasn't a word for this. This means valuing and stewarding our local renewable water resources instead of depleting distant rivers and aquifers. So we all know that the Colorado River water supply is not a water supply that we can just infinitely take. And we're going to be getting less and less of that. And honestly, we just don't want to be overusing that water because it's depleting that watershed, that river, and all the plants and animals it supports. So we really want to focus on our own watershed. How do we get to back to being hydro-local? Another piece that we've introduced to the community as part of our vision is that we can actually cool our city 5 degrees as part of all of this work. A lot of the work we do at Watershed Management Group is rainwater harvesting, graywater harvesting, green infrastructure, creating microclimates. So this is a fun set of photos from community members who are out building green infrastructure and planting native plants to create those microclimates in their own yards, at their churches and schools and community centers to bring that microclimate back down and cool our city. These next few slides, I'm very excited to show you. These are all photos from our photographer that we work with a lot, Julia Schlossberg, and it really showcases our sacred rivers. The rivers are the lifeblood of this desert. They are what allows all of us to be here and the plants and animals they support, and we really want to reestablish that connection to our sacred rivers. This is a photo of the Santa Cruz River near downtown. Here's another photo of the Santa Cruz River where there is an effluent outfall. So recycled water is being released on several locations along the river. We're going to talk about that more later and the impact this project might have on that reclaimed water going into our rivers, which is so important right now. We have the Rito River, which feeds the Santa Cruz. Historically, this river would have had seasonal flows. It would have had extensive riparian forests. That's not how it looks today, but again, we think that some of that can come back with this restoration work if we really prioritize water for the environment, water for our aquifers, water for the rivers. Another photo here of the Rito River looking east, that confluence area that I had the illustration of earlier, really gorgeous photo. And then I have several here of the Tanque Verde Creek. I love this photo. This was a few winters ago. Shows the snowpack on the rincons. And this is where our water supply comes from. If we're living hydro-local, we're thinking about where the water comes from. We have this amazing watershed, the mountains that surround us. The rain and the snow falls on those mountains. It soaks into that watershed. It moves down underground and above ground, eventually makes its way into the valley, into the Tucson Valley, and then flows through our creeks and rivers. We want to make sure that water is really protected and not a drop of that is wasted. This photo is of a middle stretch of the Tanque Verde Creek where there is some returning seasonal flows. Watershed Management Group does a lot of restoration work along here. And it's just showing what the riparian forest could look like along a lot more of our creeks and rivers. Just imagine how cool our city could be with this restored. Just a few more photos here of Cienega Creek. Oh, one more, sorry. Lower Sabino. Lower Sabino Creek feeds into the Tanque Verde Creek, and that's another area of perennial waters. And then finally, Cienega Creek. Also love this photo. It's showing what a wetland looks like. We don't have a lot of these left in this region, but historically they would have been all over our watershed. This is where beavers are going to be reintroduced later this year. So very exciting work happening right here in our watershed. This last photo I just had to put in, one of the most recent photos of Julius has shared with us. Perhaps you might see, what do you think you're seeing here? Maybe you haven't seen anything like this before. A little bit of a magical scene from Cienega Creek taken in July. This is fireflies. And I just love this photo because it really captures the wonder and the beauty of what could be in our watershed as we restore these rivers, as we restore the wetlands. The fireflies would have been pretty extensive historically. Now they're just a few pocket populations and a few remote places like this. But just imagine if we invest our reclaimed water, all our green infrastructure, our local waters into our local watershed in this way. I think I'm passing it back to Melanie.
Thank you, Lisa. I really appreciate having that grounding, touch grass in common parlance, in the desert or in our rivers. But we're here with that kind of nervous system reset to discuss our potential new neighbor, the $3.6 billion data center campus known as Project Blue, which calls itself a water positive friend to Tucson. Now, there is a ton of information out there about Project Blue. We can't possibly take care of all of it and address all of it in our time together today, but we're going to really focus in on the water positivity claims because that's our jam. We do water and we do river restoration, and there's a lot of language in that water positivity claim that centers around stuff we actually do here at WMG and have for a long time. So that's going to be our focus. And so Project Blue, just a quick summary, is a multi-phase data center project for southeast side of Tucson out by the fairgrounds. It has 2 phases that are currently in the documentation that has been released by the city. There is a 3rd phase floating out there somewhere without a lot of information about it yet. But we're going to be focusing on the data from the first 2 phases because that's what we have. In terms of process, Pima County has voted to sell those 290 acres, but the property now needs to be annexed by the city of Tucson in order to connect to Tucson Water. So there was one vote, now there has to be another. And this is where we have an opportunity to stop this project because the mayor and council have a decision to make about whether to annex that land so that Tucson Water can provide service to it. And I want to just touch back on hydrolocal for a second because you're part of this, and understanding all of these conversations about water is more readily done when we understand what our actual local hydrology region is. So we're going to go through a little journey here. This first slide that I'm going to talk about is the Tucson and Avra Valley Aquifer. So we've got this is from Tucson Water, and this is what you would think of as groundwater. So this is the water that's underground that we are drawing on for drinking water and other purposes. You may hear other terms like water table is saying what the level is of that groundwater, how high it is, how far it is below the ground. So you can take a look at this little slide and kind of get a sense of the Tucson Mountains there in the middle. The city of Tucson has one aquifer, and then there's another out in Avra Valley, and they join up at the top. That aquifer is located within the Santa Cruz watershed. So the Santa Cruz watershed is the region, and I'm just going to use my little mouse here for a second. This is that area of the aquifer right here around Tucson, but the watershed is much larger. This is the whole geographical area that drains toward the Santa Cruz River. All the creeks and rivers within their region make their way eventually to the Santa Cruz. So when we think hydrolocally, our smallest scale is our immediate home or our office, the built environment we live in. But the Santa Cruz watershed is the full range of our hydrolocal. It is situated within the Colorado River Basin. So you can see Tucson way down here in this. That means that our little watershed, our little aquifer is right around the Tucson dot. And then the watershed for the Santa Cruz River goes all the way down into very northern Sonora and up the whole Santa Cruz River. We are within the Colorado River Basin. That means that the Santa Cruz, all our water eventually, if our creeks were flowing as they used to, would drain toward the Colorado River. And that's where it would end up before going to the ocean. We also get water from the Colorado River that is piped to us. So that is one of our significant supplies of water here in Tucson. So we have our groundwater from the aquifer, and we have our piped water from the Colorado River. Now, having situated us in geography, I want to situate us in history. And these are some of the most impactful photos to me. This is the Santa Cruz River looking from what we now know as a mountain in 1904. So take a look at this for a moment and really see the flowing river. It had perennial flow, meaning year-round flow. And there's this mesquite bosque, this mesquite forest stretching all around it, cottonwood groves. Imagine how much cooler that area was than it would be now if you were to walk down to the banks of the Santa Cruz River. So this, in fact, there are people alive today who grew up swimming in the Santa Cruz River. This happens to be in the 1989-90 range. I couldn't resist, they're so cute. But there are people alive today who also swam in the Santa Cruz River when they were kids. One other view of the river here. This is looking from Martinez Hill, which is near the San Javier exit on I-19. Again, you can see these massive forests all around that little gleam of water there in the middle. So when we are looking at our rivers, when we drive across the Santa Cruz or the Rillito, and it's this big dry expanse, it's really easy to think that that is normal. That when we look at something like this photo from 2002 of that same area, we were just looking at the forest in, it's easy to look at that and think, wow, it's normal. This is normal, this dryness, but it's not. It's a catastrophe that is already here and we are living in it right now. So our emergency is already today. And yeah, I have a lot more to say about that, but I'll leave it at that for now. So how did we get here? Remember I was talking about the aquifer and the groundwater levels. So if you take a look at the pictures in this slide, you'll see the top slide, we've got the groundwater levels high enough that the trees can reach them. So the trees got their roots, their toes are down in that water, they're super happy. But then in the second photo, that groundwater level has dropped due to excessive pumping, usually pumping of our groundwater. And then that's complicated by drying conditions, which get even drier because there's no vegetation that's, preserving the water. So it becomes a vicious circle, but the instigator of that is the excessive pumping and then bad development decisions, such as Sam Hughes, you may know him by the neighborhood. Sam Hughes decided in the late 1800s to dig a big private irrigation ditch that dug into the edge of the Santa Cruz, and it caused massive erosion and did the river significant damage. So we have a history of bad development decisions around water here in Southern Arizona and in Tucson, and that's something that we don't want to continue. Let's take a look at what that water level looks like. This is from Tucson Water. This is our water level decline. So how far below ground level are we finding water? And this is 1940 to 1998. And you can see a 230-foot drop in the bright orange area right above city of Tucson. And then there's a gradient. That's the deepest drop. And there's a gradient from there where it's all dropped in that time period. And it had already dropped before 1940. So it dropped before we had data on this because of pumping and development decisions. And so what we're looking at is this catastrophic decline. I'm going to contextualize us again within the Colorado River Basin. This is data that just came out in the last couple of weeks. A scientist from ASU did a study using NASA satellite data. This is measuring the changes in the groundwater supply in the Colorado River Basin. These two images are depicting the rate of groundwater level drop in two periods. On the left, you've got 2002 to 2014. So you can see by the colors that there was, except the very northernmost part, there was a drop. It was continuing, but it was not, as wild as it gets in 2015. So in 2015 to 2024, in the past 9 years, the rate of drop has increased dramatically throughout the region that we are dependent on for our water supply, partly because it's our watershed, is embedded in one of that little dark orange color down in there in the corner, and because of the Colorado River pumping. It's coming from an area that is stressed in this way. However, we have made some local progress. So from 2000 to 2022, again, Tucson water data, we have seen areas of our aquifer come back up. Now, this doesn't mean they're all the way up to where they used to be, but they have come back up. So in that area that had been down about 250 feet, right, and right now, it shows a gain of 78 feet. So it's come back up 78 feet in that area. When you get into these orange areas, those are areas that have continued to drop. So the cool colors are gains in the level, the warm colors are drops. Part of the reason that this has been possible is Tucsonans. I love the data on this slide. It geeks me out. So let me explain what you're looking at. From 2000 to 2022 on this slide, although we actually have data that goes a year later, there was a consistent drop in how many gallons of water Tucsonans used per day. So in 2000, Tucsonans used about 110 gallons of water per person per day for residential purposes. So the things you do around your home. In 2022, it was 75.7. And in 2023-24, it was down to 74 and change. So that is an easy 36-gallon drop in 24 years of per capita water use, which is amazing. Tucson is one of the most water conscious cities in the country, and Tucson Water, when they say that their conservation programs are second to none, they're not kidding. They have done a lot of work to make this possible, and we are proud to work with them on that. I teach rainwater harvesting classes, gray water harvesting, and those are partnered with Tucson Water for their rebate programs, and it's been very effective. So Tucsonans have been doing this, but Tucsonans haven't been doing this for a data center. Tucsonans have been doing this for our water, our environment, our future, our families, our rivers. And now Project Blue wants to be a large part of our watershed. So we're gonna, with all that context, we are now gonna talk about what's a data center. So a data center is a massive building that houses computer servers which are processing data, big old computers. They use lots of power and they generate a lot of heat. And if they overheat, they aren't efficient. So, you know how hot your laptop can get, or your phone gets too hot out in the sun and it shuts off, same concept. And the main way they cool these systems is water. And to be clear, this is a consumptive use of water, because the water is evaporated in the process. So whatever water is evaporated in the process of cooling, just like you're an evaporative cooler, is lost to our watershed. And so it's a consumptive process. So this is very similar to how trees make the temperature cooler with evapotranspiration. Trees are natural cooling devices because of how they work with water. So we do actually agree with Beal on one thing, and that is that water makes things cooler. We just would rather we were cooler than data. So how much water will the Project Blue Data Center use? Now, this is going to be an unfolding story throughout the rest of our time together today. But I'm going to define some terms first as we get through this. First off, acre foot. So when you're starting to talk about water or any kind of, getting into any sort of industrial management kind of level of things, there's an industry shorthand. So acre foot is something you'll see a lot when we're talking about volumes of water here. An acre foot can be visualized this way. Imagine a football field, and then imagine it a foot deep in water. And that is about an acre foot of water. So it gives you kind of a visual of how much water that is. We're going to talk about a little more lingo here. Wet water and paper water. I know some of you have heard this terminology. Wet water is actual water you can drink. It's, the stuff that flows in the river. Paper water is water rights. So it is, I have the right to draw on that water, but it is not actually water. It is a potential. And it doesn't usually serve a river very well, the paper water. So with those terms kind of defined, and we're going to come back to them later, let's take a look from the city's summary of how much water these phases are going to use. Now, if you recall, I said that there were 2 projects within this first proposal. So that is primary project and second project. If you look at that, the full build of the primary project is totals out to 870 acre foot per year. And then you add that to the secondary project and you get to a total of 1,910 acre foot per year. So that's a football field with 1,910 feet of water on top of it in a big old column. Another way of thinking about that is 622,375,410 gallons per year, or the daily residential use, or the annual residential use in this case, of 23,042 Tucsonans. So 23,042 Tucsonans would use as much water as these data centers are going to use in a year. I do want to note one more thing on this slide. Sorry, we got a little, there is this comparison to golf courses as being, how much water is being used. We're not big fans of golf courses either, but at least the golf courses are actually sinking that water into the ground and they're nurturing plants that can create somewhat of a cooling environment. So we do want to note that that is a difference between these 2 things. We are going to get into the actual draft development agreement. So this is on the city's website. The city has a copy PDF of the draft development agreement between Beal and the developers and the city of Tucson. And we're specifically going to be talking about this terminology of water positive. So define some terms here. You're going to see these little graphics more as we go. Water positive is defined as replenishes, adds to the system, more water than it uses. Water neutral, which is our little yellow with the minus sign on it, but it was close as we could get to neutral, replenishes the same amount of water as it uses. And water negative is going to replenish less water than it uses. So we're going to come back to these as we go through here. So the first thing that we need to know is that Project Wheel is going to need to connect to city water and promises to expand the reclaimed water infrastructure in that southeastern area of what will be Tucson if this goes through. And they will begin by using potable water. Potable means drinking water, water that would come out of your tap that's ready to drink. So for the first 2 years, they are able to use drinking water. And then after that, they are supposed to switch to reclaimed, recycled water. And the reclaimed or recycled water is what is frequently used for irrigation. It's also referred to as purple water because its pipes and its emitters and all of those things are marked with the color purple. There is nothing to stop Beal from continuing to use potable water aside from money. They would have to pay a fee if they kept using the potable water, but that fee is not water. So that is something that's built in there that they could continue to use our potable, drinkable water in perpetuity. They would just have to pay money. So let's take a look. All of these little screenshots are going to be from the development agreement. We've just highlighted some parts. So first off, developer will achieve water positivity as defined herein by replenishing at least 100% of the project's consumptive water use. So if they are replenishing at least 100%, all they're promising is to replenish 100%, which is not water positive, it's water neutral. So the terminology of water positivity just sounds better than saying water neutral, which is actually what they are promising us. As we take a look into that in a little more detail, you'll see that water positivity, there's 2 ways they can accomplish water neutrality. One is through participation in water positivity projects, doing stuff, which we're going to talk about in a second, or the payment of water positivity rates. So I'm going to get into what those rates are in just a second. But essentially what we're seeing right now here is that as it's defined here, water positivity means developer can either do a project or they can just pay money. Those are their options. So they don't have to do any of the projects that they talk about. We're going to dig into that in a little bit more detail. These offsets apply to the both potable and reclaimed water. We touched on that water positive can be defined as doing projects or paying money. And then in that final orange highlight, you will see water replenishment projects include, but are not limited to. So meaning that here's a laundry list of things we could do, but nothing, they don't have to do any of it. They could do other stuff too. And then there is a particular line in here I want to highlight in blue, which is that selected projects, if they're choosing to do a project rather than to pay fees, need to be located within watersheds that connect to Tucson Water's supply portfolio. That sounds great. They need to be connected to our supply portfolio. But what watersheds are connected to our supply portfolio? Well, we are connected to the Gila River, the Salt River, the Colorado River, all the way through this region. So there are multiple watersheds that are not our watershed, are not hydrolocal, are not feeding our aquifers, but are connected to our watersheds that are connected to the Tucson water supply portfolio. So that language is pretty fuzzy. They could do work that's just not here. So that's one. Now let's hit another one. Back to the money. How is the water going to be valued? So this is that fee that they can pay instead of doing a project. And here's in the language, for every gallon they can't offset in, or for every gallon they can't offset in water, they'll pay $750 per acre foot. So this is on top of what they're already paying for the water. And let me talk about what aspects. We talked about the 1,910 acre feet of water that they're going to use a day per year for cooling. they're not replenishing 1,910 acre feet of water. They are metering when the water comes into the facility and when the water goes out. And they're measuring the difference between those two numbers. That is the water that was evaporated, lost to the system in that process of cooling. That is what they are saying that they will offset. They will replenish or replace or offset with money. So it is that portion that evaporated between the meter coming in and the meter going out. Now, so they've already paid for the water, but if they are not going to offset the water, not going to replenish it in any way, they're going to pay an extra $750 per acre foot. So for every one of those football fields, a foot deep in water, they're paying $750 if they don't do a project. Two things to note. One, this is less than most Tucson water conservation strategies cost. So it is an undervalued number in our experience of having done a lot of this kind of work. It's undervaluing our water and what it takes to do projects. And two is, this is pocket change to a company like Amazon Web Services. This is very, very small amounts of money in their world, and money does not feed rivers. So with that, I am going to hand it over to Catlo to talk about water replenishment rates. I want to introduce what he's going to do for just a second. So Catlo Shipek has done extensive work in watershed restoration projects and river restoration projects. He has actually done this kind of offset calculation created a water positivity program for a community. He has also done this work for a corporation here in Tucson that wanted to voluntarily offset. So he's done the math on what it takes when you start getting to actually doing a water replenishment project, not paying money, but doing work. What does the math look like to actually replenish water? So, Catlo, my friend, take it away.
Thank you, Melanie. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you all for being here. Yes, let's dive into what a water replenishment ratio might be or should look like. But starting with Project Blue, replenishment ratio. So that's the term they're using. So how many gallons of water should be replenished for water used? So they're offering a 1-to-1 ratio. And so this means I give you a bucket of water and you give me a bucket of water back. So Project Blue would use a bucket of water, and then they would give us a bucket of water back. So that brings a couple questions to my mind is what type of strategies are they proposing? We'll dive into that a little bit. And then what's the uncertainty with each of those strategies for giving us a bucket back? And so maybe the bucket's a little bit leaky. Maybe there's uncertainty in how much water will actually be in that bucket when it's returned to us. So oftentimes we think of a replenishment ratio as more than just 1-to-1 to ensure that we get that bucket back. So let's move forward a little bit and looking at what are the strategies they're proposing and what's the level of uncertainty in each of those strategies. So the first bullet item, investment in direct potable reuse through funding of advanced water treatment technology, outreach, or education. These are excellent things. However, do they give us a new bucket of water back to our community? In the terms of direct potable reuse, that bucket of water, recycled water, it's already in our One Water portfolio. So that is not new water. Yes, we'd love to treat that to a higher level, but it's not new water to us. Neither is outreach, neither is education. So that would have, not even uncertainty, it's just not new water to us. River and wetland restoration to increase stormwater and surface water infiltration. Now, stormwater is new water when we think of stormwater that's supplied from runoff from hardened surfaces. So that could be new water. But what's happened in the last year? We're in one of the hottest and driest years. Did we receive that rainfall? So when we count on rainfall, count on stormwater, there's a greater level of uncertainty if we will receive that water. So we would have a higher offset ratio. The same with water conservation programs. So I teach you or I provide an incentive to use less water. What's the guarantee that you actually will use less water? And not just for this year, but for the next 20, 50 years. And so there is some uncertainty even with conservation programs. Some of the other strategies they've listed are on the right. The other piece I want to pull out is the advanced metering infrastructure. So that is to enable early leak detection. Oftentimes that's at the customer meter. So that could even notify me as a customer I have a leak. So we can quickly address that and there's less water waste. However, that's from the customer side to my house. What happens in the infrastructure if it leaks as it's being conveyed to my house or to my business? So it's may not be accounting for those leaks as well. So there is uncertainty with all of these strategies.
And if I can just interject for a second, I want to remind people also that when we look at this list, it is a list of things that look really good. I mean, there's nothing on this list that we really object to. However, it is not a shopping list of things they are going to do for us. It is a list of possibilities that is designed to look appealing. It is designed for us to not, I can't argue with any of these things. They're great, but they don't really mean what they seem to mean. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for adding that. And I will also add that we here at Watershed Management do green infrastructure, we do river restoration, we are trying to enhance stormwater recharge. But that's to replenish our already depleted aquifers and to restore from an already point of degradation. So that's not even accounting for the new water that's proposed to being used. So one-to-one offset ratio may not be sufficient for replenishing the water used by Project Blue. So that's where we would recommend at least a 2-to-1 offset is needed, and also not considering paper water strategies because that doesn't deliver wet water to us or to benefit our aquifers or rivers. And so the other piece of this is that new water would need to be taken from somewhere else. So if we're looking at importing more water, where is that water coming from and how is it degrading that other watershed or river system? So this isn't being hydrolocal. So we want to live within our limits and learn how to live within our limits. And just to add, so yes, I've worked on developing a conceptual model for a water offset groundwater mitigation program for another community. We've even been the recipient of a corporation that had a voluntary water offset program just as part of their corporate social and environmental responsibilities. And realizing that some of the work we've done hasn't even provided the benefits that wasn't originally intended to be or expected because we've had so many drought years in the last 10 years. And then to add from a report that Amazon itself produced in 2023 is they can only account for replenishing 4 out of every 10 gallons they use. So they can't even achieve it at their corporate level. What makes it think that they can achieve it here on the ground in Tucson? So then stepping back a little bit, we have 2 maps. So the map on the left is what we think are historic conditions for our creeks were from a flow regime perspective. So the darker blue means that those creeks and rivers flowed year-round. The lighter blue means they flowed seasonally. And then the dotted lines mean they flowed only with storm events. And so comparing the left map to the right map, we can see we've lost most of our wetlands. As we've previously mentioned, we've lost the flow in our rivers. We've lost that groundwater connection to our surface waters. However, we have the potential, thanks to years of letting that main Tucson regional aquifer rebound, and also due to the intentions of water conservation strategies, enhanced stormwater recharge, we're able to get a lot of our shallow groundwater systems to rebound to support surface flows in our creeks and rivers. Then the question is, especially looking at recycled water, which will be supplied to Project Blue in future years, is right now that extra recycled water, what we're advocating for is let's use that to further replenish our aquifers, further benefit our creeks and rivers, and also those communities where those rivers flow through. So the map on the right has yellow segments along that. So the longest ones are potential areas that we could reflow the Santa Cruz River and achieve groundwater credits for future long-term storage. And they would also benefit those communities who are most impacted by our current heat and heat stress. So we could create natural cooling corridors through those communities. And then the other piece is along the lower Pantano, Tanque Verde, Upper Rito. That used to have year-round to seasonal flows. We could support that through recycled water recharge opportunities. And then interestingly is if we do supply Project Blue, we would actually be drying up some of our rivers. So the segment, the orange segment in the upper left of the right map is the section that would be at risk of drying up if we were to supply that recycled water to Project Blue. Next slide, please. And to back that up, Dr. Michael Bogan, a U of A professor who's been studying the Santa Cruz heritage and downstream along the Santa Cruz River, the ecological rebound thanks to recycled water in our rivers, has documented that or estimated that this could dry up 3 to 5 miles of the Santa Cruz River. So we would lose fish, turtles, dragonflies, and other aquatic wildlife. And it's not a question of recharge credits. So he even goes into number 3, the highlighted box, that we can move that recycled water to elsewhere in our watershed to benefit our watershed health, our community health, our river health. And we would still gain those recharge credits. And we have that infrastructure. It's just merely putting in those outfall systems to allow that to happen. Thank you. Back to you, Melanie.
Thank you so much, Catlo. So far we've discussed that they're not promising us water positivity, they're promising us water neutrality. They don't have to actually pay, they don't actually have to do projects. They could just pay a fee, and that fee is relatively low compared to what these kinds of projects actually cost per acre foot. And that when they get into those projects and they start to do the replenishment math of how do I account for uncertainty? If I take a bucket of water from you and I give you a bucket back, but my bucket has a big old hole in it, I need to give you a much bigger bucket to ensure that you get as much water back as you gave me. And so a lot of what they're talking about is either the math just doesn't math on actually replenishing at a 1-to-1 ratio, if at all. And in most cases, the ratio is way off. So we are going to be losing water if they do those projects at the way it is set out. And that puts them into water negative territory, even if they actually did the terms of the agreement. However, but wait, there's more. There is also water being used here they are not even touching on offsetting. So the first of those I want to touch on, that's our little one, is the construction water. So there is a call out in the agreement that says that the drinking water that they are provided for construction purposes in this 290-acre plot of land, the largest development project in Tucson, that water they are not required to offset in any way. So that's water used for dust mitigation, spraying down the dusty areas they've dug up so that the dust doesn't fly anywhere, and whatever other purposes they use it for construction. That is not something that they are paying us back. However, I'm not going to go to the next slide quite yet because there's a lot happening on it. So I want to contextualize it before we go there and I lose you all to looking at the numbers. The power that is needed to power these data centers is staggering. So they need as much energy to run at their 50% level, so 50% of their overall capacity. They need as much energy as TEP currently provides to all homes in Tucson, which is a staggering amount of energy. And then if you get them up to 80%, that continues to go up. What has not been addressed anywhere is that generating power requires water. How much water depends on the kind of source. Is it coal? Is it gas? Is it et cetera? So I'm going to go to the next slide, and I want you to listen to me for a second and not get too far in these numbers before I get a chance to talk you through. So the water for power generation is not accounted for anywhere in this offset or the development agreement at all. So remember that 1,910 acre feet per year is their stated use. So that's how much water they're going to use for their facility. But let's take a look at these numbers. And these are courtesy of Russell Lowe's, who is a local power plant economist, works a lot in the realm of power. So I want to tell you how he arrived at these numbers that he kindly shared with us. These are based on TEP's current portfolio, meaning currently they use this much coal, this much natural gas, this much solar, this much wind, and how much water each of those different sources uses. So this is their current portfolio because that's all we have to go on, because so far there is no explanation of how they're actually going to generate that much additional power. But let's take a look through this one by one. If they are operating at 50% of their electrical capacity, so probably early on, that would require an additional 4,631 acre feet of water per year to generate that amount of power. So represented as gallons, that is 1,504,969,752 gallons. So if you take that football field, we've got the 1,910 on it, we add the other 4,631, and suddenly we have over a mile of water piled on top of our football field. If they go to 80% of their electrical capacity, which is likely, the power draw on these facilities tends to increase over time, that acre feet is 7,409 additional acre feet per year. 2,407,951,603 gallons of water per year. So now our stack of water is approaching 2 miles. If they go to 100% of their electrical capacity, that is an additional 9,261 acre feet per year, added to the 1,910 they are already using. And we're at 2 miles on top of our football field. And I'm going to read it out because these numbers are big and they're worth it. 3,009,939,504 gallons of water a year. Now, if the portfolio changes, these numbers may shift. So if the portfolio mix changes, these numbers could vary. This is based on the current portfolio. Other things that Russell Lowe's shared is that they are likely to want whatever the new power source is to be geographically relatively close, because they have to use all those big transmission lines to get the power to where it's going to be used. So it's going to be relatively close, at least in Arizona. So whether it is actually within our watershed and it is our specific 4,631 acre feet that they are drawing on, or it is in a neighboring watershed, it is depleting precious water resources. Because you remember that slide we looked at of the drops in the Colorado River Basin, the lower Colorado River Basin of water levels, which is essentially Arizona. So this is a massive additional water draw that is not accounted for at all in the documentation we have to date. So in summary, Project Blue's water positivity ain't water positivity. It starts out as neutral. They don't have to do anything for us. They can just pay a fee. Our water is undervalued in what they are giving us. That $750 fee is low compared to what it actually takes to do the kind of replenishment. And they aren't replenishing water at a realistic rate. They even are offering paper water instead of wet water in that replenishment. And then that list, that very pretty list of water replenishment projects, isn't a list of things they will do for us. It's a list of things they might do. And it's a list of things that we are already doing or advocating for the most part, in order to sustain our local watershed health and resilience, to cool Tucson, not to provide resources for an extractive industry. And furthermore, the development agreement vastly underestimates how much water they will actually use by overlooking the water needs for power and secondarily construction. And we are the folks, we here at Watershed Management Group, if they were to choose to do these kinds of water positivity projects, we are one of the primary organizations in the region that does this kind of river restoration work, this kind of green stormwater infrastructure. And we are here to tell you, we don't want Project Blue's money. We want wet water. We want wet water for our rivers. We want wet water for our people. We want wet water for that 50-year vision. I'm going to unpack the Cool Tucson thing just a little bit here. In the past 100 years, Tucson's average temperature has increased by 11 degrees. 6 of that is global. There's not much we can do about that here locally, but 5 is local. 5 is because of our built environment, is because of the depletion of our rivers. That is something we can do something about. And cooling Tucsonans, cooling Tucson, that is a project and a vision worth undertaking, not cooling data. So one of the ways we get there is defeat Project Blue, but there's gonna be another one. So what we need at a city level and county level is a water allocation policy. Let me explain what this is. A water allocation policy is when a community sets standards before entertaining a particular proposal. They set standards of what they will and will not consider in their economic development proposals based on the water use compared to jobs and economic impact. And they set a guideline that says this needs to come into a balance that aligns with our community's long-term survival, thriving, and values, and the health of our water, our community. And if it doesn't, it's not considered. And so these standards are part of the city or town code, so they endure past changes in mayor and council. They filter out those undesirable interests that would otherwise want to come in. It sounds fabulous, right? Well, let me tell you, we have neighbors who have done it. First off, Chandler, Arizona has a policy that I think has been in place around 10 years that is designed to deter water-intensive projects like data centers from being approved because of the ratio of jobs to water. And so if it's out of line with the city's vision for long-term growth, it doesn't even get considered. And there isn't a whole political process with lobbying and all of the things we're doing right now. Gilbert, Arizona has a policy that's modeled on Chandler's. It is specifically designed to take that political influence and pressure on elected officials out of the picture so that it is just a decision based on policy. Last week, Mojave County, Arizona, up in the northwest corner of the state, Mojave County, Arizona voted to remove data centers from the list of businesses they want to attract because of the water and energy consumption as opposed to the jobs created. And in December of last year, this is not a water allocation policy, but it's interesting. In December of last year, Marana modified their zoning to create a special zoning class for data centers. And the particular thing of interest to us is that they specified that they will not provide potable water. They will only provide, if it needs to be some other source, they're not going to provide potable water. Now, having that kind of policy in place allows us to shape an actual hydro-local future for Tucson. The city of Tucson's One Water 2100 plan makes it clear that all sources of water are equally valuable, that reclaimed or recycled water, stormwater, groundwater, surface water, which is the Colorado River water being imported. And so that's actually part of the plan, is that all of those are equally valuable. So just saying that, well, they're just going to use reclaimed water is actually out of alignment. To be dismissive in that way is out of alignment with the City of Tucson's One Water 2100 plan. And that recycled water is particularly valuable for multiple reasons. One is the restoration of our rivers, the restoration of our aquifer, and the cooling of Tucson. So a hydrolocal city is one where we value all of those equally. Now, imagine what we could do with that water to cool Tucson. And there's been a lot of talk about jobs, and jobs and economic development are absolutely important. And to get to this vision of a hydrolocal future for Tucson, we need businesses and workers and skilled tradespeople who have the skills to enact this future. So some of those things are like that buy block program that's opening this year to recycle plastics into the blocks. Businesses, we need more businesses that support green stormwater infrastructure and rainwater harvesting. We have to actually have a list of contractors here at WMG. We need people who specialize in sustainable architecture and construction. We need gray water retrofit plumbers. I live in a 1960s house, man. I would love to have that gray water compatible, but that's a whole project and it's beyond my plumbing skills. I need somebody who's knowledgeable about that. We need urban forestry professionals to care for those massive new forests we'll have along our rivers. We need native planting savvy landscaping contractors. And with those rivers in place, we'll have a whole ecotourism and sustainability industry because people will be inspired by us. So what we want from mayor and council is no on Project Blue. And we want a city water allocation policy that prevents future data centers and other water intensive industries from getting to this point. And we want institutionalized to prioritize water for urban forests, river restoration, and aquifer recharge to cool Tucson and provide long-term water security and quality of life for the people who live here. That is what we want. So you can swing by our welcome center. You can come visit us. You can take a tour. You can look around our property. You can say, oh my God, how did you go without water, city water for that long? And you can pick up some cards that feature some of those beautiful photographs of our river to send to mayor and council. Thank you very much for sticking with us here. And that was a lot of information. And I am going to hand it over to Cody to start looking at what are the questions.
Okay, first of all, thank you so much, Melanie, to WMG for providing this platform for people. We've had a lot of, interesting comments in the chat. I've done my best to gather them. A few housekeeping things. We are going to be posting this presentation afterwards, and then we're hoping to do, watch out for more for WMG in the coming weeks. If we don't get to all of your questions right now in about the 10 minutes we have left, then we are pretty much going to stop at 7. Then we will, continue to try to address those through new articles and things that we're going to be doing over the next few weeks. So pretty early on from Ron, there was an interesting question that I thought would be good for Catlo to clarify. Basically, the land has already been sold. What are kind of the ways that water works in Arizona? Can people just drill their own well if they own the land? So is that an option that could happen?
Thanks, Cody. Good question. And that's one I've been kind of pondering myself, or what would be a next step for Project Blue if the city doesn't go through an annexation process. And my understanding, so industrial use is regulated by the Tucson Active Management Area for groundwater. And so then my thinking is they would have to apply for a permit through the Arizona Department of Water Resources to be able to drill a new well. And part of that permitting process, I believe they would have to do a hydrologic analysis looking at what their how their pumping would impact the local aquifer. My guess, Pima County may have the ability to say no to a well permit. I'm not quite sure what jurisdiction Pima County itself has. But my guess is based on the pumping rates or not the pumping rates, the daily water use rates, they would probably far and exceed our aquifer's ability to provide that water without a significant drawdown, which would exceed ADWR's stipulations.
Great, thank you so much for that question. And then next up from Shelley, Beal has basically expressed willingness, Beal the developer, to build an aquifer recharge facility in a public recreation area. Lisa, is that something you want to talk about?
Yeah. I'd like to talk a little bit about how recharge happens in our aquifer and where it best happens, and that is in our rivers. So when water is flowing through our rivers naturally or from outfalls from reclaimed water, some of that water recharges into the aquifer naturally. We have the sandy alluvium in these rivers. It's a natural place for that recharge to happen, and it happens very effectively. Building a recharge facility is very expensive and not as effective as recharge in our creeks and rivers and arroyos. So from our perspective, there's no need to build a recharge facility. In fact, it would be wasted money because water really should be in our rivers where that recharge can happen naturally. Also, when water is in our rivers, it's supporting an ecosystem that cools our cities, that has wildlife habitat, that's a community amenity. When water's recharged in a recharge facility, it is not providing that community amenity or ecosystem.
Thank you so much. And then actually, Melanie, this is questions coming to you. So currently in the development agreement, could Tucson Water shut off the water to Project Blue if they don't use potable water after 2 years? If they don't switch from potable water, excuse me.
Sure. So in the development agreement as it stands right now, there is not a provision to just shut off their water. So there are fines that they have to pay, there are fees, but they are not required. There's no penalty beyond money.
Thank you. For Catlow, how much of our increase in aquifer levels is due to CAP recharge, water banking by Tucson Water?
Great question. My understanding, so most of the Colorado River water comes in through Avra Valley, which is then recharged in Avra Valley, so outside of our Tucson regional aquifer. So the recovery we're seeing in the Tucson regional aquifer is through our natural recharge. That includes mountain front recharge and alluvial river recharge whenever we have either snowmelt runoff or stormwater runoff moving through our channels. And that has been happening, and that recovery has been allowed to happen because we have switched, or we being largely Tucson has switched to utilizing their CAP, Colorado River allocation, and pulling it through their system to distribute across the valley. And so that has allowed them to turn off the local wells that are distributed across our neighborhoods and our town, and only relying on those wells in emergency needs or in peak demand situations.
Great, thank you so much. I'm going to take a quick moment to pause for a suggestion rather than a question from Kevin Dahl, who posted in the chat. When you send your postcards, please include your name, which ward you live in, and a way to connect with you, preferably over email. So thank you so much for highlighting that suggestion. And then to another question. This one's from Lisa. It's kind of another one I'm reframing from a couple different questions. But basically, we've heard the talk about recycled water kind of as garbage water. And people are wondering how that water, should be valued into the future. If you'd like to talk about that.
Yeah, so Melanie had mentioned the One Water concept. Tucson has a One Water 2100 plan where we value all the different types of water. So that includes groundwater and rainwater and stormwater and reclaimed water. Right now, there's a difference in how our potable water is priced and our reclaimed water is priced. And Watershed Management Group would like to see that change because we believe that reclaimed water is just as valuable. It's extremely valuable to our aquifer recharge, to our rivers, and it really should be prioritized for that use. When it is prioritized for other uses, it can be essentially dewatering our watershed. So that reclaimed water can be treated to a high level, which is appropriate to go into our rivers. And Tucson Water has plans to build a facility that would treat reclaimed water for potable use. So it's extremely valuable in that it can be turned back again to drinking water. This would be something to note when you send your postcards, that reclaimed water is valuable and that we want to see it going towards community amenities like our rivers and for future potable use and not for data centers.
Great. Probably only have time for a few more. I've been trying to keep up with the questions that are coming in while I'm running this Q&A session. Somebody asked to kind of clarify a little bit more about paper water and maybe not understanding the connection between wet water and paper water. So Lisa or Catlo, would you like to talk a little bit more about that?
Sure, I can start and maybe Lisa or Melanie can fill in. Paper water. So paper water is essentially a legal document saying that you have the ability or you have a water right. However, you may not have access to that wet water to receive that water right. So a lot of times we think of it as you may have a surface water right, but what if the river is dry? So you won't be able to receive that right. Or it may be a groundwater right, but maybe that groundwater is some other place geographically that doesn't have the infrastructure to bring it to where we need it. Or maybe it's a wheeling agreement that may depend on certain legal constraints. So typically there's a lot of constraints, access, other concerns that may be abound to it. So it's not a guarantee that we would receive that wet water when we most need it.
Yeah, and I'll add to that, that paper water allows recharge to not happen in the same place where water is used, potentially. So like we had a graphic about, I think where some of the water levels have been coming up that showed Aver Valley, where a lot of the recharge is happening. And yet groundwater is still being pumped in the Tucson Basin and some of those shallow aquifers. So it's also problematic in terms of like, when you look at the numbers on paper, it may look like there's no groundwater being pumped, but the actuality is that groundwater is being pumped over here and recharged over here. And so that's one way that paper water is used to like kind of create that break even, but on the ground, it's not pinning out that way.
Okay. Kind of a follow-up question on reclaimed water for anybody on the team who can take this one. It's been talked about that there's like an excess of reclaimed water. What are some of the ways that reclaimed water is used in the system? How are they released into rivers? And then what are some of the hurdles to having that happen?
Should I take that one? Okay, and then feel free to jump in. So recycled water currently is discharged from two of our local wastewater treatment facilities, Agua Nueva, Tres Rios, and as well as some of it is put back into a reclaim system that is distributed across the area. The water that is discharged into those rivers flows down the river. Those are actually within and part of a managed aquifer recharge system. So we get recharge, we being collective Tucsonans get recharge credits for that recycled water that reaches the groundwater. There is a small, very tiny consumptive use by the riparian vegetation. So it's usually metered from a stream gauge where the discharge happens and then a stream gauge downstream looks at the difference, and that is what is recharged. A small portion of that at certain times of the year when there's excess recycled water and there's not the demand through the recycled system, or not enough of it is getting infiltrated into the aquifer, does flow past into the next county. And once that does, the collective we, lose access to being able to credit that recycled water. So it's not necessarily lost water, it's just we lose the credit, but that water is still providing a ecological function along that river corridor. So part of the proposal and what we're advocating for is, if that's really a primary concern of the cities or other utilities, is let's move that water elsewhere into our river system and creek system to where it can benefit both the local aquifer, the river system, and the surrounding communities as part of our natural infrastructure. And then we still keep that recycled water within our system, but we can achieve multiple benefits from it.
Great, thank you so
I'll
much.
I'll just add quickly that a lot of the reclaimed water currently is used for golf courses. That's one of the primary uses, as well as turf at schools and with HOAs. So in residential developments, that's where a lot of the reclaimed water is currently going.
Great. And we're pretty much at time, and the WMG team has had a very long day. So we are going to start to wrap this up. Wanting to address again some of the things that have been coming through the chat about the postcards. We're going to be doing our best to, some people have been asking what to do if they don't, if they can't physically stop by, but they still want to contribute. We're going to put some talking points up on our website. Yes, all that is coming, and as well as this presentation. If you live outside city limits, but still want to send a postcard, we encourage you to send them to the mayor. And then also we're going to try to, as I said earlier, follow up with as many of these questions, but just kind of one final question, to wrap it up. Lisa, how do you think that we can balance the water concerns and benefits to the city as we grow kind of like a hydro-local future together? Maybe that wasn't the best phrasing of that question, but basically saying that the concerns, with benefits. Sorry, I exited out of the chat and now I lost my phrase. Do you want to just end with the hydro-local?
Yeah, I think ultimately that this is an opportunity, right? As we have these threats coming in for our watershed, to really focus on where we're headed, to kind of reaffirm our values around how we value water for the community, for the wildlife, for the rivers themselves, and how important that is. Data centers, we're not saying that data centers are bad per se, because we all are using these data centers on some level, right? But we're saying that they're not appropriate in the desert, they're not appropriate here in our watershed. And I think all communities are really looking at this issue. This is a hard issue for all communities right now. So we're all struggling with this. We're looking at, is this a not in my backyard? Well, yes, it is a not in my backyard, an NIMBY moment for us. I think because it's a water intensive industry, we have to decide what's appropriate here in the Sonoran Desert, what food we grow in the desert, what industries we have, and being really careful about those decisions and really intentional. So thank you all again for being here tonight. Appreciate it. It looks like Melanie has a comment to add.
Yeah, I just wanted to talk a little bit about next steps. I saw some of that flying through in the chat. We are going to send you an email with some links and resources. However, there are a couple things coming up really quickly that we want to make sure are on your radar. The first of those is that there is a session offered by the city virtually tomorrow that will be presentation from the Project Blue proponents. And so by all means attend that, ask your questions. I believe No Desert Data Center, the coalition, Blue's coalition of folks who have come together informally to oppose Project Blue, are hosting a watch party. So you can check their socials and specifically Instagram for that. On Monday, there is an in-person session, Q&A session being held at the TCC, Tucson Convention Center Ballroom. Absolutely show up to that, be there, ask your questions, make sure that you have an opportunity to, present what you think about the data center project. And then on the 6th, Mayor and Council has a study session around midday. And during that study session, they could decide to just shelve Project Blue at that study session, which would be great. But they could decide to, move it forward. So No Desert Data Centers is also organizing people to be there at that study session and to be there throughout the day and to the events that the mayor and council are also having a meeting in the evening. So depending on what happens at that session, there will be other things that unfold over the coming weeks. And then mayor and council will have another vote potentially on August 19th. So you can track all of those various things. Here at Watershed Management Group, we're very focused on the water elements of this and trying to really understand and speak about those as clearly as we can. There are a lot of different ways to talk about Project Blue, and we can't possibly do all of them in an hour and a half here with any depth at all, but there are lots of folks who are doing that. You saw we drew on Russell Lowe's work for power. There are a lot of folks that are sharing different kinds of information. I would invite you to look at some of the op-eds that have come out in the Tucson Sentinel and the Daily Star, write one yourself, and get engaged in those various different ways. And 1,000 thank yous for joining us tonight for this. We hope we were able to offer you a little inspiration of what a positive future for Tucson and our watershed looks like. In addition to knowing what we're fighting against, we can know what we're fighting for. So thank you very, very much. We will send out the recording as soon as we got it, and good night.